Hi, I'm Lisa Ruble from Quilty Zest, and I'm excited today to be sharing the block that I created for the BenartExperts Spring blog hop. Here's a look at my block, and it's a Wonky log cabin block, which is one of my favorite types of blocks to make. I used the 6 colors from the palette that I selected from BenartEx's Superior Solids. And I created this in the traditional log cabin way where you're working in logs around the center. And this is what it looks like. So I'm going to show you how to put this block together. It's easier than it looks because when you're doing an improv or a wonky type block like this, you don't have to worry about cutting and measuring everything perfectly, and it'll come out just fine the way it is. But I'll walk you through how to do it step by step so that you can do it as well. And one little hint, if you're new to improv and want to try a slightly less complicated version of this, instead of doing these piece strips here like I did, you can just use one fabric and kind of get your feet wet with improv piecing and then go back and try one that has all these piece strips in it. So that's an option as well. So let's get started. So before I show you how to make my block, I want to talk a little bit about the palette. We each got to choose 6 colors for our palette, and I chose these 6. And this is kind of probably my ideal color palette. It's very similar to my Find Your Way fabric collection, and then with the green added in. But I used, this is ginger, mango, celery, teal, Carib, and capri. Fun group together. And I'll be using all 6 of these in my block. So the first thing we're going to do is make the pieced skinny strips, and that's made by using a strip of each of the colors. So I cut a 1.5 by 21 inch strip from each of my fat quarters, and then cut each of those in half so that they're roughly 10.5 inch long strips. Then I'm going to choose the order that I want to sew these pieces together in. And you're going to make 2 of these, and I recommend doing a different order in each one so you've got some variety in your finished block. But choose the order, and then I sewed them together in pairs, and then join the pairs to make a whole pieced unit. So here's what my pieced unit looks like. And I'm going to press it. I'm going to press all the seams in the same direction. Okay, and now I'm going to cut this into skinny strips. I'm going to square off on one end to get started. And then I'm going to cut 1.5 inch wide strips across this. You can kind of use the lines on your ruler to make sure that everything is staying nice and square. But since this is actually a wonky block, if it gets a little off, no big deal, because we want it to be wonky. And you'll make your second strip set and do the same thing with that. That will give you lots of strips to work with. That is a little too thin, so that's our extra. So I came up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I've got 6 strips from one strip set to work with. And again, I'm going to do this with a second strip set as well. So I'm going to start with my center square, and I'm going to sew one of these skinny strips to the side. And as I'm sewing it on, I have choices to make. Do I want to start at this end or this end in terms of colors? And then I can either line up my raw edges there, or I can slide it up a little bit and have some more color down at the bottom. Now, the other thing I want to keep in mind is I don't want to end up with a seam right along the raw edge, because it will end up in the seam allowance for the next one. So if that looks like it's going to happen, I can pull this, I can pick this seam and just have that extra seam allowance there instead. If I start above here, I'm good to go and I won't have to deal with that. So I've got a 3-inch square here, and I'm sewing a skinny strip onto the first side. Okay, and when I stitch, I always try to stitch with the skinny strip on top, because that way I can control which way the seam allowances go, where if it's on the bottom, they might flip up, and I don't have control over that. Then I'm going to press, and I'm always going to press so that the skinny strip's seam allowance stays flat. So in this round, I'm pressing towards the center. Now I'm going to trim it off even with my square, and I'm going to add a second skinny strip right here. And I could even, if I wanted, use this one right here. I'm going to use a different one, but you can definitely reuse different pieces. Well, those colors are too close. So if I turn this around, I've got the green. This is why we have 2 different sets, so you can play with how the different colors look together as you join pieces. So I've got my second log joined, and again I'm going to press these seam allowances towards the center. Okay. And what's fun is that all of these blocks look different from each other because of how your strips join together, how the color placement lays, and so everyone looks different. So I can kind of decide where along here I'm going to slide. Do I want the orange to show? I think I do. I'm going to do this. When I do improv blocks, I spend a fair amount of time auditioning, seeing how different colors work together, different with strips and all of that. So now I'm going to trim off this skinny strip even with my square. And these I can hang on to. I might use them down the road. So now I'm adding my 4th skinny strip log. Let's see if I take this version. That gives me some colors I don't have over here. And okay, so I'm going to flip that over and sew it on. Okay, and now to join my, to press my 4th log piece open. That's what it looks like so far. And now I'm going to start my second row, and this row is going to be done with the capri strips, and these strips are 2.5 inches wide. And I'm always going to add them to the side that has 2 seams. It's a little tricky to see here because I have all these other seams, but if you flip it over, you can see this is my edge that has 2 seams. So that's where I'm going to trim and add. I'm going to square it up. And I don't necessarily like sewing with this whole long tail, so what I'll do is I'll lay my strip down and just trim off, so I've got a little bit of excess when I sew it on. And you still want to be sewing this way with the pieced edges up so that you can control where those seam allowances go. I'm going to press this log open, and then this will now be the side that has the 2 seams, so this will be where I'm adding the next strip on. So I'm going to trim it even with my skinny strip here. Take another Carib strip, trim it to about the length that I need, and sew it on. Okay, press this one open, and now here you notice I'm pressing out. It's different from the first round of logs. Okay, there's 2. Now I'm going to be adding to this side because here are my 2 seams. So I'm going to trim this side even with my skinny strips, and then add this on. Okay, I'm going to press this 3rd log open, and now we're back to the 4th side. So I'm going to trim these edges and add, move those out of the way, add another strip. Okay, now I've got 2 rounds of logs on, one made out of skinny strips and one made out of solid fabric. But you can see my block still looks pretty square at this point. It's got a little wiggle to it because these skinny strips, they tend to add a little improv to it, but for the most part, it's pretty square. And now is the time to do a little check-in to know that we're on the right track to make a 12.5-inch square block. I'm going to measure it here, and I'm at approximately 9 inches square. A little bit more down here, a little bit less up here, but about 9 inches square. So we're in a good place. And now we're going to add another round of the skinny strips. But you'll notice that the skinny strips are too short with the ones that I've made. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to join 2 together. So I'm going to put these together in pairs so that I've got long enough skinny strips to do each of the 4 sides. And I'm not going to put those 2 next to each other because the oranges are too close to each other. So I'm going to do these 2, but I'm going to vary how I join them and which ones I join for variety. Okay, so here is where we add the wonkiness, because instead of just trimming this straight, I'm going to either trim it leaning to the left or leaning to the right. And that's what will make this block even more interesting. So I'm going to lean my ruler to the left, trim that off, and you notice I trimmed on the side that had 2 seams. And now I'm going to sew a skinny strip to that side. And I'm still going to keep an eye out to make sure that I don't end up with one of these seams right down at the bottom edge, because again, that'll just create a lot of bulk. So I'm going to sew this one on. I've got my first strip, and now I'm going to go back to pressing towards the center so that I'm not adding to the bulk here. Okay, so now I'm looking at the side that has the 2 seams. That's where I'm going to trim. But again, instead of trimming straight, I'm going to choose, do I want to angle it to the left, to the right? I'm going to go to the left. Okay, and then take another one of these double strips that I created and sew it on. Okay, skinny strip log number 2 on. And we can get a little wiggly because we are cutting on angles, so we're not cutting with the grain necessarily. So you want to give it a nice good press. And now I'm going to do the 3rd side. You see I've got the 2 seams, so I decide, am I going to go this way or this way? Now at this point, you can see if I angle it to the right, it ends up with very much kind of a diamond shape. So I'm going to go back to the left so that I have something that is a little more in the square family. Okay, another strip. That looks like a good spot for it. Okay, press this 3rd piece log, my skinny strip, towards the center. And you'll notice I'm not trimming on the opposite end because I will do that when I add the next round of borders. So last skinny strip border, and I can choose this way, that way. I'm going to stick with my angle to the left plan as I've done kind of all along. And here is what I've got. Oops, I've got a thread there. Okay, I'm going to press this last one open. Okay. So now it's time to add the outer border. So I'm going to trim. Now we're going to add the outer round of logs, which is using the Carib. And these are 3-inch wide strips. So I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to trim a little bit past my strip and then just sew it on. We are not going to trim the skinny strips on an angle because they're pretty skinny in the first place. Okay, I'm gonna press my log open and move on to the next side. And I'm still adding on to the side that has 2 seams. So what I'm going to do is line up my ruler with the skinny strip and trim off those edges. Then grab Let's grab this shorter one I've got here and sew it on. Okay, I'm going to press this log open and I'm going to add the next two in the same way. So here is my pieced block. You can see it gets its wonky look from the center part here, and then from what we're going to do for the last step, which is to trim it down to 12.5 inches square. And this is another place with an opportunity to audition. You can see if I just lay it straight, it's going to look like what I've got going on here. But what we can do is angle my 12.5 inch square ruler, either angle it to the right or angle it to the left, and that will make our block look even wonkier. Let's see, I'm going to go to the left because this intersection here is kind of angled to the right, so I think it's more interesting to go in the other direction. And then what I just look at is where the skinniest parts of my outer border are and kind of try to even them up. And what I will do is I will trim 2 sides at a time, because then I only have to reposition the ruler once instead of 4 different times. And now when I reposition it, I know where it's going to go on my left and my bottom edge, and so then I know where to cut on my right and my top edge. Oops, missed a spot. And there is my finished block. And like I said, what's so fun about these is that every single block will look different based on how all of your angles go and how you sew these little skinny strips on, which makes it a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed my video showing you how to make this wonky log cabin block that I created for the blog hop. If this has piqued your interest in doing some additional wonky or improv piecing, I have a couple patterns in my on my website that use this technique. There's one that's called Wonky Spirals and one that's called Zuzu Squares, and they both are log cabin versions similar to this, so you can play around with them a little bit more. If you do make this block, I hope you'll share it on social media or send me an email with a picture of your block, because I'd love to see it. This is one of my favorite piecing techniques, and so I love being able to share it with other people. Thanks for watching. And if you're just meeting me for the first time through this blog hop, I hope that you'll stick around and look around a little bit. My website is quiltyzest.com. And you're on my YouTube channel right now, but you can also find me on Facebook and on Instagram under the name Quilty Zest. And on my website, I've got a lot of different patterns that I've created, both wonky ones like I talked about a little bit earlier, and then some that go with my first 2 fabric lines with BenartEx, including what you see behind me, my Sunset Vibes trio on the top using my Nature Unfiltered fabrics, and then my Postcard Views trio on the bottom using my Find Your Way fabrics. So I hope you like what you've seen here and that you'll join my sewing community and see what I'm up to.